Well, hello and welcome once again to attending Pale Bloom, the YouTube video channel where I am conducting interviews with various musicians and artists, past and present. Be sure and check out my written interview site, palebloomsandbeyond.wordpress.com. Today, I'm visiting with Daniel Wylie. Daniel is a singer-songwriter from Glasgow, Scotland. He headed the band Cosmic Rough Riders in the late 90s, early 2000s. And in 2002, he left the band and released several solo albums. Last year's Atoms and Energy is the first album since 2000's Enjoy the Melodic Sunshine, with Daniel back at the helm. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, how are you?
Good. You doing okay?
Yeah. Considering how old I am now.
How's the weather there?
Yeah, it's okay. Raining a little bit earlier, but we're heading for a Scottish summer, which means we will have about 4 or 5 days of glorious sunshine over the next 6 or 7 weeks. The rest will probably be rain.
Is that right? So it's like a springtime.
Yeah. You know that song, It Never Rains in Southern California?
Oh yeah.
He should write another song, It Always Rains in Glasgow, Scotland.
Yes, Scotland does have a kind of that kind of image that most people think of when they think of Scotland. Okay, well let's go back to the beginning. You were born in Glasgow, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
At the time I was born in Glasgow, my parents lived in a place called Springburn, which is in the north side of the city. But for the rest of my life, I've lived in the south side of the city. But Glasgow's not that big a city compared to like a major American city. It's a small city, but it's also, I think it's the third biggest city in the UK. There's London, then there's Birmingham, then there's Glasgow. It's the third biggest. So.
You're right. I visited Manchester probably 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
With my brother, and we talked about going to Scotland. Never did get a chance to. We were only there for a few days. Excuse me.
Well, okay, you missed yourself then. Glasgow's a fantastic city.
I've always wanted to go to the Scottish countryside. It's gorgeous from what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean the islands and all that are great. All the little islands off the coast, they're fantastic. It's like paradise on earth.
Oh yeah, very beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk a little bit more about your childhood. Do you have any siblings?
Oh yeah. I'm the oldest, but I've got next in line would be my sister, Veronica, and then I've got a brother Joe and a brother Frank. So I'm the oldest, and I'm the only one that went into music, but they're all big music fans. We were a big music family. Like music was always played when we were children. You know, like my dad had good music taste. He loved people like Bob Dylan. You know, he liked Irish folk music like the Dubliners, stuff like that. I don't know if you've heard them. Have you heard the Dubliners?
Oh yeah.
So he had great taste in music. Loads of country stuff. Hank Williams, people like that. You know.
You had mentioned Graham Parsons before too.
Oh yeah. Graham Parsons as well. Yeah. My dad introduced me to the Byrds through Sweetheart of the Rodeo album,
right.
Which as a child I was used to hearing the Byrds like pop singles, you know, pop hits, Mr. Tambourine Man, etc. All I really want to do. So when I heard the Byrds doing a country album, it was a bit of a shock to the system. And you know, it's not one of my favourite Byrds albums, but it did open up my mind to, country rock. So I'm always grateful to that album and the Graham Parsons first two solo albums and the International Submarine Band and all that stuff
Oh,
for getting me into like country rock. So.
Oh yes, that's some good stuff. Yeah, that Birds was through a lot of people, straight country. You know, it was just real different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your so your dad introduced you. You heard a lot of music being played in the house.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
Loads of people like Lee Hazelwood and Nancy Sinatra.
Oh yes.
Bobby Gentry.
Uh-huh.
Stuff like that. Really melodic music. Probably his favourite at the time when I was growing up was Bob Dylan, though. We heard lots of Bob Dylan and Hank Williams constantly. People like Buddy Holly, rock and roll stuff as well. But it was all music that was melodic, and then, for me personally, my parents would buy me a couple of records, 7-inch vinyl records, like every week.
Right.
Like pocket money. What do you want to do? I want to buy a couple of records. And I would buy things like See Emily Play by Pink Floyd and A Whiter Shade of Pale by Procol Harum and Nights in White Satin and Beatles singles, stuff like that. So I was forging along and getting my own music that was for me that I liked. So away from their taste.
Do you remember one of the first 45s or 7-inches that you got?
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of my grandmothers gave me some money at Christmas, and we were out in one of the big department stores in Glasgow, and it had a record department. And I was 6 years old, and she gave me some money, and I said, I want to buy a record. And the record I bought was I Got You, Babe by Sonny and Cher. And I still love it to this day. Fantastic. That's the first one I remember buying with money given to me by someone else.
Right.
That shows you how old I am.
Well, I think you're only maybe a couple of years older than myself. Yeah. I remember. Can you remember the Royal Guardsmen?
Yeah.
The Snoopy albums.
Yeah.
That was I think Snoopy's Christmas.
Snoopy versus the Red Baron. No, that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
I remember that. It was kind of that was like a novelty record.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, they were. They were a really talented group. They did some other stuff, that was showed how really good they were. But yeah, it was definitely novelty.
Good musicians though.
Yeah, very good musicians. Yeah. So so you mentioned, as a teen, what were some of the music, the bands, artists that you were into or listening to?
Steely Dan.
Oh, okay.
In a big way. I remember I heard the first ever Steely Dan single on Radio Luxembourg, which you could pick it up at night time in the UK. And I had one of those little transistor radios I used to take under the covers at night in bed, and I would listen to that. And one of the first songs I remember hearing on it was the first Steely Dan single, a song called Dallas. It didn't make it onto their album, but I loved them. And then I heard it was either Do It Again, I think, and then Reeling in the Years. And I thought, I need to try and save up and get the album. And I went into Virgin Records in Glasgow, and I think I might have been 13 at the time. And the counter was high, and I was a little person because I'm only about 5'4" or something just now. But when I was 13 years old, I was really small, and I probably could have passed for about 9 or 10. And I went up to the counter and I said, "Have you got the Steely Dan album, please?" And he says, "Is this for you? Is this album for you?" And I said, yeah, it's for me. And he called all the other members of staff over, and he like pointed over the counter at me. This little kid wants to buy Steely Dan. How cool is he? So it was quite an amusing thing for me looking back, you know, how it must have looked, this little child going in to buy the new Steely Dan album. And that's before Steely Dan were, you know, well known.
Yeah.
I just heard them on Radio Luxembourg and I thought, I'm having that, I want that. So that was quite an amusing moment in my life.
Oh, I've always been a big Steely Dan fan. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and you mentioned Dallas. That was so close to our hearts here because I live in a suburb, I guess, of Dallas, like you could say. So at the time when that came out, I remember my friend telling me, "It's like, wow, they have a song about us," you know.
Yeah. And the B-side never made it onto any album either. A song called Sail the Waterways, which is, I think that, I'm not sure if Donald Fagen sang that one. I can't remember. But neither of these songs has ever been on a Steely Dan album. So up to this day, and even when they remastered the albums, they still wouldn't put them on. So seemingly, Walter Becker didn't like anything, so he wouldn't approve it. So they never got on. So you need to find the vinyl single, but you can digitally download them now. Loads of people put them up online, so they're easy to find.
Easy to get, easy to find. Yeah. Well, what was the music scene? Let's say when you were in high school, or what, you know, around that time in Glasgow at the time. What was the scene like?
Well, do you know, it was the days before the internet, so, and you know, computer games, so everyone was interested in music, and the people who were big in my school that people liked were people like David Bowie.
Yeah.
You know, especially when after he was on Top of the Pops, when he sang Starman, it was like an overnight sensation for someone who'd been making music for 10 years without much success, and suddenly he was this superstar. I personally liked a lot of American bands. I loved the Steve Miller Band,
Yeah.
the Doobie Brothers, stuff like that. That was my. I loved Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills and Nash, people like that. Those James Taylor. I was Joni Mitchell's one of the great loves of my musical life. She's someone who I think is she's one of those people who made original music from something that already existed, but she took it a step further and created something that was distinctly hers, if you know what I mean. And I've always admired people who make music that doesn't really sound identical to others. A little bit of originality in there. That's
Right.
what I look for.
Right. Or how about the Eagles?
Yeah. I mean, the Eagles, it was always like, do you like the Eagles better than Steely Dan? And for me, the answer was definitely no. Right. But my dad had this little market stall in Glasgow in a place called Barrowland. And it was a record stall, and we sold records. And when the Eagles' Greatest Hits album was released, I eventually sat down and listened to it properly, and I thought, this is great. I've been wrong all along, you know. Steely Dan are great, but the Eagles are also great. So I became a lifelong fan of the Eagles, and particularly in Joe Walsh as well. He's a hero of mine. We used to buy records in, you know, those records that end up in the bins, the cheap bins in America, overstocks, and we used to get them imported from the USA, and my dad would sell them on the record store, and it'd be loads of great albums. It'd be, you know, early things like the Mamas and Papas, you know, Three Dog Night, just loads of great bands, you know, and we would buy these albums dirt cheap because nobody wanted to buy them over there. They'd either sold all they were going to sell, or you know, or they didn't sell. But we would buy them in and stock up and, you know, sell them on our little market stall in Scotland.
I
So
I wonder if that's like a case of the grass is always greener, because I've always been an Anglophile.
yeah,
I love British music.
right,
I would say probably 80% of what I have, my collection, is the UK, Scotland, some Ireland, but I mean,
yeah,
the UK. And I've always, I don't know, from an early,
mm,
well, not early age, but probably probably in my teens and in the 20s, I started really getting into. And in the mid 80s, with the
yeah.
alternative scene, it's just, it just blossomed, but
I have
but
to, I do have to mention, a couple of bands that I absolutely loved when I was young, and they were probably the kind kind of music that really stretched my imagination and beyond the 3-minute pop songs that I loved. Genesis and
oh,
Yes,
oh
and
yeah.
Yes. You know, the early Yes albums and Genesis albums are fantastic. And also I loved Led Zeppelin as well. I thought they were great.
Oh
They had that mystical thing, you know, the black magic thing going on that, you know, teenage boys think, oh, that's cool. You know, I mean, he knows Aleister Crowley and etc. etc. And it opens your mind up to, you know, other kinds of like literature as well, books that you might want to read after hearing what some of these people are writing in their lyrics and stuff like that. So it triggers other interests as well, you know. But Genesis and Yes were big for me.
yeah.
Those you know, 8 and 9 minute songs,
Mhm.
gorgeous
Oh,
melodies,
oh,
you
the
know.
early Genesis is,
Yeah,
with Peter Gabriel. That's
yeah.
yeah. I was lucky to see them in concert, but of course that was
Hmm.
with Phil Collins. But they
Yeah,
did a lot of older stuff too. But yeah, I had my progressive period. Um,
yeah.
you mentioned Moody Blues earlier.
I love the Moody Blues. Yeah,
What
they are
about
fantastic.
Barclay James Harvest?
Hmm. Do you know, we had a when I was in Cosmic Rough Riders, we had a guy come over from Arista Records in the USA, who was interested in signing us to that label. And when he came over, his name was Louis, and he looked. This is no lie. He actually looked like Danny DeVito, right? He was the spitting image of Danny DeVito, and his name was Louis, which was the character name that Danny DeVito had in Taxi. And
See,
he bought me one day. He went into a record shop and he said, "You have to hear these records." And he bought me 16 albums on CD, and a couple of them were Bartley James Harvest, and he loved them.
yeah,
But you know, to me, Bartley James Harvest were like a weak man's Yes or Genesis. I just don't think they ever reached the same level of songwriting quality that
right.
Genesis reached. But they still get good songs, so I'm not saying they were a bad band. It's just that I liked Focus, the Dutch band.
Right.
If you heard them,
Right. Yeah. The thing that
Moving Waves album,
I'm sorry, say that again.
Moving Waves album by
Yeah.
Focus. It might have been
Oh, yeah.
called Focus 2.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh
Yeah.
man. What's the lead singer's name? uh,
Or
uh,
is it Tidjes Van Leer or something? I can't
yeah.
remember. I don't know how you pronounce it. They're
Yeah. Yeah.
Dutch.
Uh, boy,
They're
that was
from
the
the Netherlands.
first time anyone had done anything like that, and just
Yeah, yeah,
almost yodeling. He was
yeah, yeah.
just.
That album, if you ignore that single, which sounds like a gimmick single, the rest of that album's fantastic. It's a masterpiece. One of the best prog albums ever.
Right. Right.
Check it
Exactly.
out.
Exactly. I will. I'll look into that. Any Scottish bands that you were into growing up, or
Well, yeah, the Average White Band,
mhm,
um, the White Album, the one with Pick Up the Pieces
mhm.
and You Got It. I thought that was a fan. In fact, Pick Up the Pieces is my all-time favourite song. by a Scottish artist.
Mhm.
You know, someone asked me recently, said, "What's your favourite song by a Scottish artist?" And that's the one that sprung to mind. Pick Up the Pieces. So,
Oh,
Marmalade. Do you know Marmalade?
yes, yes, Marmalade, yes.
I liked them when I was a little boy as well. I had a greatest hits of Marmalade. But I was more, I was into thing. I was much more into the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. You
You
know, than
must, you must have liked Jerry Rafferty and Steeler's Wheel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely love Jerry Rafferty. I've got all his albums actually. He's a fantastic artist. I found it really amusing that he had so much success in America and he
right.
never played a gig in America. He
Isn't
just refused to tour.
isn't that something?
How can you do that? That's incredible, isn't it? The music has to be super,
Right,
super great for,
right.
for an artist to be able to do that.
And not have to tour like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It seems like a lot of the Scottish bands
Mhm.
really play what you would call, I don't know, traditionally American. But you mentioned,
Yeah.
you know, Average White Band. I mean,
Yeah.
today, I mean, a lot of people that have never heard them and they hear them say, "Oh, that's a black band," and they can't
Yeah.
believe when they find out it's a Scottish band.
That's right.
You
I
know.
remember hearing James Brown heard the Average White Band, and he couldn't believe they were white.
Hmm.
He's like, "No, they must be black." Like, "No, it's a white band from Scotland." Can you imagine what his reaction must have been?
Exactly. Another one of your countrymen, Sutherland Brothers and Quiver.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
like them. I've got all their albums as well.
I did an interview with Gavin
Right? Yeah.
on the written
Fantastic.
site. And yeah, that's another one. And I think I kind of offended him a little. I said, "It sounds like you're playing American music," And he said, "Hold on a minute, hold on a minute.
Mhm.
We were the ones that created it. Then you did something with it, and then we're just coming back
All
and
right.
you know, adding
I
to
don't
it."
get offended. I don't get offended by that. My own music personally. I mean, I grew up on a council housing estate, and it's quite a poor area. So what you do is music helps you to project your dreams. And I didn't want to write music that reflected where I lived because it was so dull and depressing. And I would rather use my imagination and project somewhere else. Plus, most of the music that I was actually influenced by was American, even soul music like Motown. The
Right.
Isley Brothers in the 70s. I don't know if you've heard the Isley Brothers album 3+3,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
a fantastic album. It's got That Lady, it's got Summer Breeze. It's a fantastic record. In 1970s, Stevie Wonder, stuff like that. Everything almost that I listened to in a certain period was American music. I still managed to listen to like The Who, The Kinks, The Beatles, etc. Moody Blues and stuff. But my big love was American music. So
I've I've always had a soft place in my heart for the Philly sound.
right,
Uh,
yeah,
oh,
fantastic.
the orchestrated with
Yeah,
the
is it
uh,
Gambo and Huff,
yes, ex-
songwriters? Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Growing up, one of my favorite songs was "When Will I See You Again?" 3 Degrees.
fantastic.
Oh
I
God,
love that song.
that still gets me. Yeah. Okay. Well,
The OG's Love Train.
yes, exactly. The OJ's. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I remember getting the 45 and
Yeah,
that little emblem on there, the Philly.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so when did you know that you wanted to be a musician? At what age or what time in your life?
Well, first of all, when I left school, I became a carpenter, an apprentice carpenter joiner. And I served my apprenticeship with some guys who played in club bands, cabaret bands, doing cover versions.
Mhm.
And what would happen is at the weekend, we were all teenagers. I'd get an invite to go and see the bands playing somewhere in north of Scotland. So it'd be a weekend away, driving out in the van. They play their gigs, try and hit up on some girls and get drunk and have a great time. And one gig, one of my friends says, "Why don't you come up and sing a song with us?" And I was like, "Well, what song will I sing?" And he's like, "Do you know the words to Knock on Wood? You know the song Knock on Wood?" Who sang the original? I can't remember. The version that I knew was like a cover version by David Bowie, Knock on Wood. And so anyway, I went up and I sang the song, and all the guys in the band said, "You should become a singer." It was really good. And I really enjoyed the experience. And so one of my friends took me to one of the music shops, and they had a pin board on the wall where people would advertise if they want band members, guitarists wanted, etc., etc. And one of them was for a singer. And I went for a couple of auditions, and I got a job in singing in a band. I'd never sang in a band before. And I stayed in the band for 2 gigs, and we played only cover versions. And we played things like Wild Thing, the Trogs, the Cure song, A Forest. I don't know if you know that. The Cure. Right? Should I Stay or Should I Go by The Clash. Queen, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. And after 2 gigs, I thought, this is great, but I don't want to sing other people's songs. So I formed a band with one of the guys, and then just started writing songs. And I couldn't play guitar at the time, so I was taking my song ideas that I'd got into the rehearsal studio, and I had to try and sing the notes to the guys, And eventually one of them said, "Here, borrow this guitar and learn some chords." And I spent the next few months just learning to play guitar. And it made it much easier for me to put across my ideas instead of trying to maneuver around their abilities on the guitar. I could just take the guitar off them, show them the chords, and sing them the tune. So it made it easier. Unfortunately, I never got much better than I was at the start playing guitar. I've never been able to improve my skills very much. I got to a certain point where I could do what I needed to write songs, and that's where I was quite happy. I didn't want to become the next Jimi Hendrix or anything. I can't play lead guitar. I'm a strummer. And I get other people to play anything that's intricate that I can't play. I'll show them what I want to play by playing the chords and singing them the parts, and then I'll get better musicians to play it for me in the studio.
And it works.
Yeah, it works great.
Yeah.
Well, certainly written hundreds of songs using that method, so it works.
It works, right? So what was this? Was this your first band, the Thieves, or
no? That was before the Thieves. There was a band called Transaction. They never lasted long, but I remember going for an audition with the Thieves, and I was supposed to meet the guitar player at a place called George Square in Glasgow. And I was there and he was there, but we somehow missed each other, and I'd given up on it. And then I got a phone call from saying, "Oh, why weren't you there?" And I said, "Well, you weren't there, I was there." So eventually I went out to their place, and they played me some of their instrumental songs that didn't have any words. And they were so varied in style. One of them was actually a reggae song. And I got fed up listening to them. I said, "Can I borrow your guitar?" And I took the guitar off the guitarist and I just played them one of my songs. And they looked at me and were like, "That's it, you're in the band." And I just took over. I took over the band and I took over the songwriting and just bullied them into doing what I wanted in a nice way.
Well, it sounded like they needed some direction, you know?
Yeah, but they were great guys, and they were good musicians, and they helped me write a good few songs as well. They did their own bit in there as well. So
Well, I've heard a couple of the tracks, I guess, from YouTube.
yeah.
The party. It
Oh yeah,
reminds
yeah.
it reminds me a little bit. I don't know if you'll hear this uh, or not, but it reminds me of the Silencers, another
Oh
Scottish
yeah,
band.
yeah. The Silencers. Yeah, we actually played a gig with the Silencers.
Oh, okay.
We opened a show for them one time. And I remember it vividly because they wouldn't let us use the full PA because we were so port band. We had to keep the volume down
Oh,
so as they
really?
could have an impact,
Uh,
which something I didn't like very much about them. But they were a good band, good band.
there's been throughout the history. There's been a lot of that hijacking
Yeah.
one headline band to another, turning it off, doing things like that. Just
Well, one
yeah,
thing that Cosmic Rough Riders always did was we treated the support bands with respect,
right.
and we always gave them full PA, anything they wanted, anything that we had, they could get, because we thought if they turn out to be better than us on the night, then they deserve,
Right.
the plaudits. So
Right.
we were always fair with fans.
And I believe in karma, too. I mean, you treat them nice and remember where you came from. There's a lot of musicians, artists out there. It's like, well, they get too big. They don't have
Yeah,
the time for somebody up and coming, to help them out. Well, how about
yeah,
remember when you needed a hand?
exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
So always treat people fair and treat them well,
yeah,
and they'll remember you in the best possible character.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, and then in Soul Thief, I like the harmonica in that one.
Yeah. That's
That's
funny. That the guy who played the harmonica in Soul Thief
mm,
is a guy called Ian McKenzie. He's a fantastic blues harp player, and he was actually supposed to play on a track on Atoms and Energy,
oh,
but
okay.
because of COVID, I couldn't get him to the studio because we didn't want to spread that disease. It was a song called "Our Love Will Never Die." I was
Right.
going to have him playing harmonica on it, and as I said, we couldn't get him to the studio because of COVID, so there's no harmonica on the song.
Too bad.
But I still talk to him online. He's a great guy.
That's too bad. I forgot to ask you about that. The lockdown, how that affected you and your friends and your family. I mean,
Well,
everybody, survived, I guess.
yeah. Everybody in my side survived okay. My wife and I got it pretty badly, but
Oh,
badly for 3 or 4 days, and then it was gone. Well, slowly, gradually, it went. But lockdown was great for me as a songwriter because I had nothing else to do, sitting about the house or write songs all day. And I think I wrote maybe about 10 albums worth of half decent songs during lockdown in 2 years. It's amazing. I don't ever have to write another song ever for the rest of my life because I've got so many sitting around that I can use. And it was almost like there's nothing else to do. Just write your future
right. That's
and
good. I mean,
write it now. So
there is a blessing in disguise there,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it,
It hasn't stopped me writing. I'm kind of like, my wife will say to me, I'll say, can you put the TV on mute because I've got a song idea? And she'll say, why do you need more songs? You've got thousands of them. And I'll say, but this one might be special. You never know when the special ones are going to come. So you just keep writing anyway, even though you don't need to. You just write it. It's in your blood. The little ideas pop into your head and you've got to let them out. So
yeah, well, I'll go ahead and ask you now about your inspiration and how you compose and write music. Where does that come?
well, in the early days of the Thieves, I was a big fan of Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson, and I used to write like jumpy pop songs that were, you know, bar chords, that, like bouncing songs. But the biggest change for me in how I approach songwriting was after I discovered REM. I loved the way the music flowed, and I loved the way they wrote songs. And I picked up the guitar, and I thought, see if I can pick up what they're playing. And every song I tried, that was like basic chords, you know, basically C, F, G, and a few minors here and there. And I thought, that's where I'm going wrong. I'm trying to overcomplicate my songwriting. I need to simplify it and just stick to these basic classic chord structures, because that's where all the great melodies come from. And you know, most of the best songs on the planet have been written in the basic chords. So REM kind of taught me that lesson, that, you know, less is more. And the main focus, you know, I mean, chords are for everyone, but if you've got a gift at all in songwriting, then the gift will probably be in the melodic part of the song, the vocal melody. And I've been lucky that I've managed to like just be able to pick a tune out. I mean, I can pick up a guitar and instantly just come up with a tune. Not always great, but sometimes they are.
Well, that, you know, melody is what always attracts me to a good song.
Yeah.
Like you said, a melody.
Mhm.
I had a friend who was always into the lyrics, you know. He
Yeah.
liked, I mean, even if it's you know, the song was discordant and whatnot.
Mhm.
Oh, listen to the words. You know what? I can't
Yeah.
get through the lyrics if I don't like the melody or the music.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I can't even hear. You
I'm
know,
the same. The thing about that is, I like a lot of like late 60s and 70s bossa nova music, you know, Brazilian kind of jazz bossa nova music, right?
yeah.
And I don't understand Portuguese. I don't know what they're saying. I don't
There you
know
go.
what they're singing about, but it's the music and it's the melodies that grab me. And I say to people, it's lyrics aren't the universal language. Music is. You know, I can listen to a song that's sung in a foreign language. I have no clue what they're singing about. But when the music's great, that's what gets you. Yeah.
Right. I'm the same way. The same way. Yeah. A lot of like French, Italian.
Yeah.
They collect German
Yeah.
music. I don't know what they're singing about, but it's the music that carries the
Yeah.
song. You know?
Yeah. It's the whole atmosphere of what they're doing as well. It just, you know, it will either touch your soul or it won't. And if it doesn't touch your soul, then you move on to something that does.
There you go. Music is universal. It truly is.
Yes.
Let me ask you about formation of Cosmic Rough Riders.
Yeah.
What what did the various members bring to the table as far as their influences?
Not much.
Not much. Okay.
Or even less. Or even less than not much. I'd been in a lot of bands, and one of the things that always dragged the bands down was having someone there was always a member who was very cynical about things and negative.
Mhm.
And eventually I got tired of being in a band, because I didn't want to be surrounded by people who were already beaten before they began.
Right.
You know, they'd already lost the race in their mind before the race began. So I decided to become a solo artist. And initially I was going to change my name. This would have been a stupid idea, because it's just ridiculous. But because I'm a massive Bob Dylan fan, I was going to call myself Dylan Wylie. And I actually had a song released on a compilation magazine, you know, cover mount CD, under the name Dylan Wylie. And then I thought, no, that's ridiculous. I'll just think up a band name. And I remember reading an article, an interview with Graham Parsons, where he said in it that he wanted to create cosmic American music. And I thought, that sounds great to my ears. Cosmic American music. I want to hear what that sounds like. And so one day I was going to my dental orthodontist, and I passed this little shop, clothes shop, and there was like a poster in the window of the shop of a girl wearing like little cut off jeans, like shorts, and they were called Rough Riders. And I thought, yeah, that's a good name. You know, I could put that together with Cosmic for the Graham Parsons thing, Cosmic American Music, and Cosmic Rough Riders. And I knew the Rough Riders in history from the like Spanish Revolution, where
Right.
they were the nutcases who were in the front line, who were sent in at the front line, crazy people, you know, to sort out the opposition. And I just thought, that sounds good, Cosmic Rough Riders. So that's how I got the name. I didn't have a band, and I started recording some demos in a community studio, which I got to use it for free. It was set up by a couple of guys I know, and with the view of, you know, letting talented people in the area where I lived come in and record some music for free. And, you know, I went in, and over maybe about 2 years, I created, I think it's 8 or 9 songs recorded, like just rough demos. And an arts office opened up in my area, and I asked them for some money to record another few songs to make an album. And they agreed, and they gave me like £500, or they paid for me to get some studio time in Riverside Studios outside Glasgow. So by then I had enough songs for an album, even though it was only demos. The only way I could get an album, it was to release the demos, and they ended up being the first Cosmic Rough Riders album, called Deliverance. I released that in 1999. It was just me. So then, the same studio, one of the guys that played on a couple of songs on Deliverance, Stephen Fleming, was learning to be a studio engineer at the time. And I thought that could be useful. I'll invite him in to Cosmic Rough Riders and see where we can go with that. So he did most of the engineering, which took us up a grade. We used all the studio downtime, so we were recording at night. And Stephen and I basically made the album together. You know, I wrote the songs, he engineered them, played most of the guitar, I played some of the guitar. We did the percussion together. We had a couple of friends come in occasionally to do some keyboards and bass and things, but mostly we made the album together. And that was Panorama, which became Enjoy the Melodic Sunshine.
Yeah, you self-produced, yeah, and everything.
Yeah, I produced it. All the ideas on it were basically things that I'd run about my head, and quite lucky, you know, Stephen being a technical guy, I could just say to him, "This is what I want," and he was happy to go with the ideas I had. So it was good teamwork between the two.
The true DIY attitude, you know. Yeah.
Also, I mean, in the studio, you have to have good ears. Sometimes the difference between getting a record that sounds great and one that sounds average is, you know, getting the mixes right, getting the EQ on the instruments to sound good. And I personally spent a lot of time with Stephen going over all these sounds, and between us we managed to get some really good sounds. But it was hard work, and it took us like 3 months to do it. But we got an album recorded for free. How many people can do that? And it went on to sell well over 100,000 copies. So
You're speaking of this, right?
Yeah.
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 Yep. Still have it. Still have mine.
Well, the new vinyl copy's just been. I should have taken delivery of the new vinyl version of it today, but I missed the postman. I was out at the shop and he put a note through my door, so it's getting re-delivered in a couple of days. But Last Night from Glasgow Records has just reissued it on vinyl. Blue vinyl, white vinyl, orange vinyl, and black vinyl. So
wow, yeah,
they're
I
all
know
the collectors.
a lot of groups and artists are doing that now. I mean,
Yeah,
with the resurgence of vinyl, the
yeah.
popularity. Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people say you can't beat the vinyl sound.
I don't know about that. I would disagree with that. I do love vinyl and the whole aesthetics of it. You know how it looks, and I love the tactile nature of taking the vinyl out and putting it on the record deck. I just don't like having to get up and lift the needle to skip tracks you don't like,
Right.
and having to get up out your seat to turn it over to side two. But I also, personally, I think CDs do sound better. But I understand the love of vinyl, and I do love vinyl myself. So I kind of buy both vinyl and CDs. So,
can you see behind me? I still have hundreds and hundreds of the ones that I can't find on CD.
Yeah.
I went through a project of trying to replace a lot of the vinyl on CDs, and I did, quite a few.
Yeah, I did that too. Yeah.
Well, were you surprised with the success of Revolution in the Summertime, and how that turned out?
Well, when you sign to a record label, the A&R guys, your manager, yourself, and the promo department will sit down and say, what are the singles on this album? What are the singles? And my choices of single were Revolution in the Summertime, The Pain Inside, and a track called Sometime. Those were my three choices, but the record company and the promo people said, no, we think Melanie, Baby You're So Free. So I was outvoted for my own record, and those two songs came out, and they both made the top 100, but they never made the top 40. Whereas the two that I chose, Revolution and The Pain Inside, which were the next two singles, both made the top 40. So
and that's something.
Never listen to the promo people.
No.
Yeah.
Just stick to your gut, right? Another another band on Pop Tones that I initially confused with you guys was Captain Soul.
Oh, Captain Soul, yeah, Adam's band, yeah. They were a good band.
I love their Fragile as a Butterfly. Oh, I love that song. That is so beautiful. And then T-shirt
69. That was a single, that one. T-shirt 69. Yeah, one of my friends, Joe Foster, who also was a co-owner of Pop Tones, he produced the two Captain Soul albums. They're very good. Adam from Captain Soul told me a great story one night, because Captain Soul opened the show for us a few times when I was on Pop Tones. And he told me a story that he was a big fan of Glenn Campbell, the country singer.
I'll mention
Glenn
him
Campbell, right? And he said, I was desperate to go and see Glenn Campbell in his local town, which is Northampton in England. And he said, but it was sold out. He said, so what I did was I phoned the local paper and said, I usually do reviews for the music press, but I'm willing to do a review of Glenn Campbell tonight for your paper if you can get me a pass into the gig. And they said, okay. And they phoned them back and said, we've got you a pass, we've got you a press pass, and you've also gone in to meet Glenn Campbell to interview him for us. And he got in and he got to meet Glenn Campbell, he got to interview him. So Fantastic story.
Well, you know, he's of Scottish heritage with the last name like Campbell. I mean,
Yeah,
sure. And there is a video, I believe, on YouTube of Glenn playing bagpipes, I want to
yeah,
say.
that's right. He could play the bagpipes. I've seen it. Yeah,
Yeah, sorry to hear about his passing, but
yeah, of course, yeah, yeah.
his last years were not the best. But
Mm.
but what was I going to say? Sure. Your the pure escapism, the B-sides and rarities.
Yeah.
What were some of your favorites on that release?
I'm trying to remember what was on it.
Yeah,
I think the song Annie. Was that on that one, Annie?
I believe so. I believe
Yeah, I
so.
liked that. There's one song on it called "I Got Over You," which was good. Sounded like Crazy Horse or something. Neil Young, Crazy Horse. I don't remember. Do you know? I wish I could remember what songs are on it. If you reminded me what songs are on it, I could probably tell you which ones I liked.
Okay, okay, scratch that one.
Was there a song called Camera Shy on it? Camera Shy?
I would have to look too. I would have to
I
look.
can't remember. Do you know? Was,
I would have to look. I know. My memory's getting fuzzier and fuzzier as I get older. You know what? You know
yeah,
what I work crossword puzzles.
yeah. Good for
Yeah,
the mind.
yeah, yeah. It is. It
Keeping the
is.
mind working.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Um, let's see, what was I going? Oh, so I won't go into. I mean, unless you want to talk about it, why you left the band. You kind of referred to that earlier. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
if you don't
the
want to
main
talk,
basically I left the band because I had disagreements with some of the other members in the band who, do you know, what happened was when Enjoy the Melodic Sunshine came out on Pop Tones, we had to do a showcase gig for Alan McGee. And the guys who played the showcase gig, apart from Stephen Fleming and myself, those guys didn't play on the records because they weren't in the band. We just brought them in. So Alan McGee wanted to sign exactly what he saw that night, even though it wasn't a proper band. So, and at that time I was 41 years old, and I thought this might be my last chance. So I might as well take a chance on it. If it doesn't work out, I can always leave. And as it happens, it didn't work out. There was various reasons for it. There was some personality clashes between myself and one member in particular, the drummer. We didn't get on. I didn't like, he was a great drummer. I'm not saying he wasn't a fantastic musician. He could play, really could play the drums, but I didn't like the way he played my songs. And I didn't think the way he played them live didn't have the right feel. Plus, we were overworked and we were touring constantly. I think we did 40-date UK tours. Then we went to America for 6 days. Then we were in Japan for 16 days. Then we were in Europe for 20 days. And we never had any breathing space. And I think when you spend that much time with people that you don't particularly like very much, you end up liking them a lot less. If you know what I mean. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean they're bad people. They're not. They really aren't. I'm sure I was a big part of the reason as well, because I'm not the easiest person to go on with. Given a situation where you're trapped in a van with the same people every day for months on end. So it's difficult for everyone, but I just knew I wanted to be free of that. And there's also a thing, Elton John's producer, Gus Dudgeon.
yeah,
Right? He's dead now, right? But he was alive then. And we played a gig in Manchester at a festival called In the City.
mm-hmm.
And Gus Dudgeon came to see us play. And he had a chat with me after we came off stage. And he said, your album Enjoy the Melodic Sunshine is fantastic. It's so well produced. Who did it? And I said, me, with Stephen. We did it. And he said, you did a great job, but I know for a fact the band that played this gig with you today didn't play in the record. And he says, they're not good enough. He said, they make all your songs sound the same. He said, and you should sack them. That's what he said to me. That was Gus Dudgeon said that. And I thought, at first I thought, who does he think he is? He's so cheeky to say that. How dare he say that to us? But I thought about what he said, and he was right. The feel wasn't right in the music live compared to what the records were. And so anyway, we went to America. We played South by Southwest in Austin, Texas.
Austin.
Yeah.
Right. What year was
Played that? 2001. 2001. We played Waterloo Records, a big in-store.
Yeah, that's a record shop. Yeah.
Yeah, we sold 200 albums in one day in that shop. Copies of the CD of Enjoy the Melodic Sunshine. But anyway, we were also bumped into Gus Dudgeon at one of the events in Austin where we were there, and he pulled me aside and he's like, the first thing he said to me was, have you sacked that band yet? Have you sacked them yet? And I was like, no, I'm not sacking them, you know. I'm not going to sack them just because you said sack them, you know. But,
well, if I had known
nice
that,
enough, guys. It's water under the bridge now. You know, right. They're all doing whatever it is they do. I think some of them playing some kind of club bands or something. But they've got
2001. If I had known you were in Austin, I would have trekked down for sure. It's only about 4.5 hours. Right?
Yeah, that's not bad.
Wow. Oh, okay. Well, you mentioned gigs. Any favorite gigs that you played in, or any headliners or supporting groups that you?
Well, I think supporting U2 was good. We played in our home city, Glasgow, 2 nights in a row. We'd been on tour constantly, and finally we had 2 days off at home. We had 2 days, and we were all ready to just go home and settle in and meet our families. And we got a call saying, would you like to play supporting U2 for the next 2 days? And we couldn't refuse it. So we did that, and it was fantastic. We made some good money at that gig, thanks to U2. And we got to meet them, stuff like that. It was a great experience. And all of the members of U2 and all of their road crew and their management were fantastic to us. They were so nice. Yeah, we left with a really good impression of them. You know, nice people. I'm trying to think what other gigs we played that I loved. Loved playing with the Jayhawks. I don't know. Do you know the Jayhawks?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think who else we opened for that I loved. We played some good gigs in Japan. We played a live gig for MTV Japan, which was broadcast live from Shinjuku Square. You know, you see the square in films with all the zebra crossings and all the neon screens and all that all around the square. We played there, and it was fantastic. And it was so hot when we played our. We played the whole set as a trial run before it went live. And at the end of the set, I took off a t-shirt and I could wring all the water out of it. It was like, you'd think I'd put it in, you know, a swimming pool and taken it out. But that was a great experience. Loads of stuff. There was so many good gigs. Supporting the Black Crows as well. They don't usually have a support band, but because Chris liked us, he came down to see us playing in London, and he brought his wife at the time, who was Kate Hudson, the actress. Yeah. He was married to Kate at the time. And he said, we should do some gigs together, man. And we were like, yeah. And we thought we'd never hear about it. And then he went over to, he was at South by Southwest as well, and the band met him over there. And he said, we're coming to the UK, would you like to open for us? And they don't usually have support bands, they just play a whole set of their own stuff. But they made room for us, and we played some gigs in the UK with them, and they were brilliant guys, great guys. I'm trying to think who else we supported. We supported a lot of good people. We did an acoustic tour with Paul Weller, you know, the Jam.
Yep.
Paul Weller.
Yep.
We did some gigs with him that were great. He was another fantastic person. But mostly we were headlining pretty quickly on our own. You know, as soon as we got signed to Pop Tones, when the records came out, they started selling quickly. And we went from playing, you know, venues that held maybe 50, 100 people to venues that held like 600 and 700 people overnight, and everything was sold out. So every tour was sold out. It was great, brilliant.
Well, how is Alan McGee, working with Alan McGee?
Yeah, I mean, I knew so much about him before, but Alan is larger than life character, and you know, I love him, absolutely love him. He's a fantastic guy, and the fact that he signed Cosmic Rough Riders and put us in a shop window, gave us hit records, gave us, you know, I've got a silver disc over there. I should have a gold disc as well for other sales, but sold his records all over the world. When I left Cosmic Rough Riders, the sales of my records dropped dramatically, but the people who bought them were fans that I gained through, you know, the success of Cosmic Rough Riders. A lot of fans who've stayed with me even till now, that have allowed me to make records, you know, continually since leaving the band. I've never lost money making a record. All my records have made, you know, sold enough to like make back every penny I spent on them, plus a profit and money to make the next record. So, and all of that's probably thanks to Alan signing us and putting us in a shop window. So I've a lot to be grateful to him for. And he's a good guy. He's just a good guy, you know. I got on great with him.
Yeah. Did you ever get played on a Peel session? Or
no, you know, when I was in the Thieves, our first single, The Thieves, we sent it to John Peel, and he played it on his show.
Okay.
And only one of the guys in the band actually heard him playing it. The rest of us never listened in that night. And so I wrote him a letter and I said, thanks for playing our single, a song called Talk Your Head Off, right? The B-side was that song, The Party. And I said, well, thanks for playing the single, but we missed it. And he played the single again, so as we could hear it. So, but that's the closest I got to having a John Peel session.
Okay. Just curious about that. Some of your solo albums, The High Cost of Happiness, where did you get that cover? That's a gunslinger, right? On the cover, is that a?
Yeah. The sleeve is by a designer called, I can't remember her name now. This is terrible. She's a great artist. I should actually look at the sleeve. Do you want to wait a second and I'll get it and I'll try and remember who it is?
Hold on, yeah. Coffee.
I can actually never remember who is on my records or anything. Right.
I want to say it's an old movie still.
No, I think it looks like Marlon Brando.
Okay.
In a cowboy outfit.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could read this. My eyesight's so bad. I've got the wrong glasses on. Anyway, she'll kill me if I don't get a name right. Do you know?
That's all right.
Another
All right.
day. But
It's
the sleeve, it's this. If you look in the booklet at the back page, it'll tell you who did it, and I can't remember her name because this is the thing about getting old.
right.
You start to forget people's
I was going
names.
to say.
Do you know? I was actually looking at some of her artwork online last week, and I still can't remember her name. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, the cover, did it reflect your affinity for country and western music, maybe?
Ashley Cook, female artist called Ashley Cook.
Okay.
From Glasgow, and she's fantastic. How could I have forgotten that? I'm ashamed of myself for forgetting that. But, no, the artwork is just the guy who gave me originally money to press up the first Cosmic Rough Riders album, Deliverance, is an artist, and he's also at that time I think he was the head of all the art galleries in Scotland or something. But he was friendly with Ashley Cook, and he said you should consider looking at her work and maybe choosing one of her works for your album sleeve. And I had a look at it, and I was spoiled for choice because she had so many great pieces of art on her website, and I thought, which one do I pick? But I picked that because of the cowboy thing. I thought it was Marlon Brando, and I thought that's going to be cool. That's the only way I'll ever be able to get Marlon Brando on an album sleeve, So I chose it. And the title, The High Cost of Happiness, reflects how I felt about having to leave my own band to find some peace and happiness. It was a high cost to pay because at that time they wanted to keep the band name, which was mine. I made it up, it was my name. And there was a lot of negotiating of things and so on. And it was a long drawn out process, but eventually we agreed on some terms where they could continue using the name and I would go solo. But it was not a nice time in my life, but eventually I got the band name back after having a proper look at the contract and realising there were a few sections in the contract that actually made things look very differently from a legal perspective. And I had some different lawyers, music business lawyers, looking at it, and they said that I had the go ahead to use the name again, plus the fact those guys split up as well by that time, so they weren't doing anything, so I just went back to using the name. Anyway, that's the nice story about that.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you too about 2008's Car Guitar Star.
Yeah.
Say that 10 times fast. No, but looking at the cover and a few of the tracks, was that inspired by a visit to the States?
Well, some of the album was inspired by a visit to the States, but I mean, and the actual first song on the album is I think I Love America, which was actually my attempt at some humour in the song. Over here we don't really get things like carjackings and stuff like that. There's hardly any guns over here. People don't have guns. Whereas in America, certain parts of America, you can just be sitting at the traffic lights, somebody will pull a gun and steal your car or whatever. And so we don't have that kind of random stuff here. People don't walk about with guns ever. So anyway, there was a line in that song is like, I got carjacked while eating a Big Mac, making my way across America. and it was a bit about the Bible Belt, which we always find amusing to look at those TV evangelists where they're telling you to give them money because God says it's good. And, you know, we just don't understand how people can be so gullible as to fall for that nonsense and hand over their hard-earned money. It seems ridiculous to us. And I tried to put some humour in on that. The album sleeve was designed by a friend of mine called David Wells, who done all my sleeves apart from Pop Tones record sleeves. And he didn't do the last album. That was the first album he hadn't done. But yeah, there will be parts of that album. There's also a song on it called Hey Melvin, which is about the supposed meeting of Melvin Dummer and Howard Hughes, where Melvin Dummer was meant to have picked up Howard Hughes in the desert in a car, and Howard Hughes had escaped from wherever he was being kept or wherever he was living. And he said, I will leave you some money in my will when I die. And then there was a big case where Melvin Dummer tried to get that money, and it had to go to court or something. People thought he was lying about picking up Howard Hughes in the desert and stuff like that. So I thought that was an interesting story. So yeah.
Yeah, Howard Hughes. Wow, what a individual. Have you been to the Grand Canyon?
I haven't, no. But I'll tell you a story about that, Howard Hughes relating to that. There was a film called Harold and Melvin.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And one of the actors that played Melvin Dummer was a guy called Paul Lamont.
Right.
And he was in the film American Graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that film?
Mm-hmm.
American Graffiti. He played the guy in the yellow car, John or something, who had a white t-shirt and he had a yellow sports car. Well, the same guy in American Graffiti played Melvin Dummer. And when he heard that about that song on Car Guitar Star, he sent me a message online saying, you know, I wanted to see, because I was in the film, I wanted to see what the song was like. He says, and it's a good song. Thank you for writing it. So bizarre.
That is really cool. That is really cool.
That is bizarre, isn't it? It's strange.
You never know your music's going to reach. And
yeah.
And
do you know you were asking about the album Pure Escapism, which is B-sides.
Mm-hmm.
One of the songs on that I remember is a song called Laura Nero, right? And I wrote it after the songwriter Laura Nero. Do you know her work?
No.
Oh,
yes, I do. Yes, I do. Laura,
oh.
Yes. Well, I say Nairo, but I think
so do I. Right, so I call her Laura Nairo. So in the song, I sing Laura Nairo.
Yes.
And then someone who's a big fan of hers pointed out to me, a lady who said, I'm writing a book about Laura Nairo, and I'd like to include a piece about your song. And she said, there's only one problem, you've pronounced her name wrong. It's
That's right.
Nero, right? So anyway, I was like, oh God. And then her cousin, who was a tour manager, read the book, and he read about my song, and he went and found the song. You know, he bought the record, he bought the album to get the song, and he contacted me and he said, I played it at that time. Laura Nero's dad was still alive when he bought it, right? And her cousin played the song to her dad, and both of them sent me a message saying they thought it was stunningly beautiful. One of the nicest things they'd written about her. Only one thing, you pronounced her name wrong. It's Nero.
See, I would have never, but I did hear that it's Nero, and I'm so used to saying Nairo.
Yeah.
It looks like Nairo. It looks like
Nairo to me as well. So it's just a bizarre story, you know.
Yeah. That's something. me ask you about Fake Your Own Death.
Yeah.
Have you, I wonder how many people thought this was a how-to. You know,
I wish it
did
was.
did you get any kind of
You know,
response?
sometimes you get a time in your life sometimes where you wish you could fake your own death and go away and start again somewhere else, don't you? But Fake Your Own Death, it was a song about, you know, how do you escape life's pressures, really? And you know, sometimes it would be handy if you could just like disappear completely and begin all over, and no one would know what happened to you, and they'd think you were dead. And that, you know, after a certain amount of time of being missing, you're pronounced dead, and you can, yes, I'm a new person. But you know, hopefully people don't have to do that. That their life is not so bad that they have to fake their own death. But some people have tried it. Many people have tried it, but I think they always get caught, don't they?
Yeah. Well, there was a Netflix documentary recently about an American, I think it was in California, back in the
Yeah.
50s. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where he did fake his own death.
Right.
They were on a bridge, and he acted like he jumped off of the bridge. I think he threw something in there to make it look like his body, but he actually just went away, and
Yeah.
had his wife help him to start a new life all over, pretending this
Wow.
whole time that he was dead. Yeah. So
Yeah. I suppose it's kind of similar to like witness protection, where
right.
you have to begin again. You know, if you've grassed up some major criminal and they're going to kill you, and they put you into witness protection, I suppose that's a way of faking your own death as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do they have that there in the UK, witness protection? Do they have that?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm sure they do for, you know, severe cases. Something really bad happens, then I'm sure they can do it. But then they'd probably move you to another country because the UK is so small. You know, you could fit the whole UK into a corner of Texas.
I think so. I think you're right. I think you're right. Um, couple of tracks on there that I really like: "Forgotten Songs"
Yeah.
and "Everything I Give You." I like the piano, the tinkling piano on "Everything I
Yeah.
Give You." Really.
Well, Everything I Give You was actually written at the time I wrote Car Guitar Star. I was just finishing it off and I was going to put it on that album, but I was running out of time. And I just thought I'll save it for the next album. But it would have improved Car Guitar Star. I think Car Guitar Star is probably my least favourite of my own records. It's the one I think I had better songs written that were older, and I replaced them with songs that were newer, but not particularly better. But at the time, they were fresher to my ears. So, yeah, Everything I Give You is actually one of my personal favourite songs I've written. It's just a love song, really. You know, probably inspired by my wife, as usual. My little muse.
Your better half, would you
Yeah, yeah, much better half.
Yeah.
Better at everything. Yeah, I don't know why she puts up with me.
I have to give my wife credit too. Yeah. How long have you been married?
30 years.
Are you kidding? Wow.
We've been together 37 years and we've been married for 30.
Wow.
And got 3 adult children.
Congratulations.
So
wow.
it was our 30th anniversary a couple of months ago. April the 11th. So she's been putting up with me for quite a long time.
You've got me beat by 10 years. This year will be our 20th.
Wow. That's still good though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is.
I
It's
like
a
being married. I like being married. It's
oh,
a
I do. I do.
good grounding.
Yes, it is.
Especially when I was in the band, and if I needed to be brought back down to earth, then my wife was always the person to ground me,
Right. Well,
keep me
how was it?
grounded.
How was it? I'm sure you missed your home when you were touring and that kind of thing
Oh
too.
yeah, because my children were young. At that time, I had 3 children under 10 years old. So I used to phone them from Japan. It'd be midnight in Japan and it would be midday in Glasgow, and I'd speak to them on the phone. And I used to send them like postcards from every city that we visited around the world. So they've got all these postcards that they've still got them as well. They've got all these
Oh,
postcards that I wrote to them when they were children, and they're all adults now. So I look back and remember it. So
that's
it's
great.
nice. They've got stuff from postcards are sent from Texas. Postcards are sent from all over Europe. As well. So, but yeah, it was tough. That was one of the tough things about touring all the time, being away from your family.
Yeah, my wife is from Indonesia,
Right.
Jakarta.
Yeah.
So I met her online.
Yeah.
Yeah, good cook, and I've been turned on to a lot of
Yeah.
Asian, Indonesian
Yeah.
food kind of stuff.
Yeah. My oldest son's an English teacher, and he spent 5 years teaching English in China. He left China just before Christmas, and he's now in South Korea, and he loves the food. He loves the food. He said the food is just fantastic.
I love. We have a few Korean restaurants around here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I do. I love the barbecue and where they have the grills that you can do it yourself. Oh
Yeah. He was talking about that the other day there, actually. Just telling us how he'd been on a night out and how great the food was, and so he's still doing that. But my other children are different jobs. My youngest son is a climbing instructor and goes mountain climbing a lot and stuff around the world as well. And my daughter's a civil engineer. So they're all doing well. I'm proud of all of them.
And what are their ages?
The oldest boy he's going to be 33 this year. He's 33 in October. My daughter's 27, and the youngest son is 20. He's almost 26. So, but they're all adults now, doing their own thing. So, hopefully, we've done a good job of bringing them up. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, that will be reflected in how they live their lives.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah. They're good. They're not just. I'm sure everyone feels this, but they're nice people. They've grown up to be kind, considerate people, not selfish idiots, just nice people, grounded and well-rounded human beings, and I'm proud of all of them. So,
see, that reflects back on you and your wife. Yeah, exactly.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Although I'm sure there's a few ex-musicians I know who would probably disagree with that.
Yeah, I'm sure too. Well, let me ask you about last year's about the Atoms and Energy.
After Fake Your Own Death, I took back the Cosmic Rough Riders name, and I released an album in 2015 called Chrome Cassettes, under the name Daniel Wylie's Cosmic Rough Riders. So I did 3 albums under the name Daniel Wylie's Cosmic Rough Riders. 2015 it was Chrome Cassettes. 2017 it was an album called Scenery for Dreamers, and then Atoms and Energy, which came out last year.
That's right. I'm sorry, I missed.
That's okay.
I see that.
Sometimes it's tough to keep up with everything that I do.
There goes mine.
I've got a good catalogue of music out there. I think I'm going to do one more album and then maybe retire from doing albums, and maybe focus on maybe just releasing occasional singles or EPs or something, because I think the market's changed as well. I think people are more willing now to listen to like maybe 2 or 3 tracks at one time, and they don't seem to have the attention span to listen to a whole album. But we'll see. I was thinking about retiring as well, going and doing a bit of traveling with my wife and seeing more of the world that I haven't seen. So
I would love to travel. I would love to travel. That's something I wanted to do.
It's great once you get your passport and your, you know, when I was in Cosmic Rough Riders, I got the record deal with Alan McGee, and I was 41 years old, and I hadn't been out of the UK, and I hadn't been on a plane. And within a year or 2 years, I think I'd been in 21 countries. The first year alone, I was on 54 planes. I was on, 30 or 40 TV shows around the world. It kind of changed my life in a way, and it broadened my horizons,
Oh yeah.
It taught me that, the world is much smaller than you actually think it is, that you can be from one side of the world to the other in roughly 14 hours. You can be at the other side of the planet. So it's not that big. And I want to spend as much time as I can seeing as much of the parts that I haven't seen already as I can. Well, I've still got time on the planet.
So the covers of your singles and your latest album, are those you as a child?
Yeah. What happened was when I put out the 2015 album, Chrome Cassettes, I was looking through some old photographs my dad had taken of me and my brothers and sisters when we were children, and I just liked the photograph that I used on that Chrome Cassette sleeve, and I've just continued it through. This will be the 3rd album, with the Chill thing, and I think it was Our Love Will Never Die single. I don't know if you've got a vinyl copy of the album or the CD or whatever, or a download, but there was a picture of me looking in a toy shop window at Christmas when I was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And it was in one of the local papers. Some guy had been taking photographs, and he's like, I'm going to put this one in the paper tonight. And I remember going down at 5 years old to the corner shop and buying a copy of the paper because I was in it, the photograph. And I used it on that inside sleeve of Atoms and Energy on the CD version only, and as a single, a digital single. So, but yeah, I thought it was a good idea using the pictures of me as a child, because there's something magical about them.
Right.
That,
right.
Taken with probably a cheap Instamatic camera that you can't capture now with all these glorious digital cameras that, show every pore up in your face. And, there's something magic about those old photographs that captured a moment in your life, a little moment that's there forever for you until you die, basically.
Right. I was thinking like kind of a return to innocence, too, and that, that what do they call it? The salad days and
yeah. Well, one of the things I was considering for the next album that I'm going to record was I was going to call the album, I don't know if I will call it this, but the idea was to call it after a film I liked when I was a little boy, a Western called Shane. I don't know if you know that film, Shane.
Oh yeah.
Alan Ladd. I loved the film when I was a little boy. My dad took me to see it in the cinema, and it stuck in my head. And it's still, I bought the DVD and all that. But I was going to call it Shane after that film. And it's as you say, it's one of those things like a childhood memory that, the older you get, the more you value these things, and you know, the effect that they had on you then, that they still have on you. They still have a hold on you as an adult. You know,
Right.
you've managed to hold on to what that child saw when he was very young, and
Right.
it's stayed with you. You know, it's meant something, and it's made a stamp on your memory. So yeah, I just
Very
thought,
good, very good. I think I enjoy watching older movies anyways, like an escape um,
yeah,
from today, the pressures and stress and you know
absolutely. Yeah,
everything.
I
It's
totally agree.
like thinking back to a happier time.
Absolutely.
I love the old westerns. I'm real partial to the spaghetti westerns.
Oh,
Too.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
Ennio Morricone, the
Yeah,
sound.
yeah. That's really weird. I was listening to Ennio Morricone just before I came online to speak to you.
Is that right? Wow.
It was
Yeah.
like it's the soundtrack to a film called Milena. It was actually it wasn't a spaghetti western film. It was about like the end of the Second World War. Um, so, but I was listening to that just before. So
Yeah. I wonder about that. I was thinking about that the other day. Did he just compose music that sounded like, it was a Western, scene environment, or do we just associate that music with with that time?
because of the setting it was set to.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a little bit of both. I think obviously, you know, when a composer sees a film, he sees it without any music, and he watches the screen as, you know, whatever's going through his head. The composition evolves in his head due to the pictures that he sees. I don't think he writes, you know, blindly without seeing the film. I think it must have a big influence on him. But whatever happened in Ennio Morricone's head was fantastic. It was perfect for those spaghetti westerns. Absolutely perfect.
It really truly works. Um, even today, even
Yeah.
back on that. Wow. Well, we're getting yeah, we're getting down to the wire, it looks like, as far as the time
Okay. Yeah.
allotted. What else keeps you busy besides music?
Yeah. Nothing really. I'm a music fanatic. I like football. I like football, but you know, not the American football. You guys play soccer, you would
Soccer,
call it.
right?
I'm a big Celtic fan, which is one of two big teams in Glasgow. Um, and but apart from that, it's music all the way. I love films. I love going to the cinema. Um, you know, if I'm not listening to music, the wife and myself will be watching something on TV or at the cinema. I love visiting museums. I'm
Mhm.
into art. I love art. I love great art. I'm useless at art in any kind of art, painting, drawing, whatever, sculpting. I couldn't do any of that, but I love looking at it. And we've got some great museums in Glasgow. But it's all about the music for me
Oh yeah.
personally. I
Oh, right.
was born to make music, born to listen to music. You know, if music's a drug, then I'm a
Oh,
junkie.
it is. I am too. I'm a junkie. I admit it. I'm addicted. It's the one thing in my life. I mean, if I didn't have
Yeah,
music, I don't know. I
yeah.
don't think life would really be worth living seriously without music.
Well, I'm in total agreement with you,
You know,
honestly. Yeah,
it's and I've got a good ear. I mean, I know that for sure. I never tried to write or be a musician, but I appreciate good music for
yeah,
sure. And the more you're into it, the more you listen, the more you buy. I guess. Of course,
yeah.
you're gonna hone that. And I've broadened my horizons quite a bit over.
I'm trying to one. I actually wonder how much money I've spent on music
Oh,
in
I
my
know.
lifetime.
Oh, I
You
know.
know, what else could I have bought with that? I could possibly a mansion somewhere
Right,
in the north of Italy or somewhere beautiful.
right. But
What
but
could
if
I have
you
bought? But then,
but if you had it to do over again, the choice, would you? All of those
no,
memories, all of that music versus, a mansion. I mean, you
no,
wouldn't
no.
you wouldn't have, yeah, right? Right.
Stuff the mansion.
Right. 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 Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not very materialistic at
No.
all. So
Yeah.
just, I'm one of those persons. What do they call it on the island samplers? What do they call it? Where they say if you're on a deserted island, give me so many
Yeah.
songs, or
Yeah.
albums.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't say. I mean, it would just
No.
be, I wouldn't be able to move on the island because it would be so full of,
Yeah.
albums and
My
CDs.
my top 10 songs of all time changes every day.
Mhm.
You know, depends on what I'm listening to, and I'll say, that would be in my top 10 songs of all time, and my wife will say that top 10 is like 10,000 or 100,000, because
Right,
every time you say this song would be in my top 10, it's a different song.
right, right. There's a lot of, let's say when I was a teenager, there's a
Mm.
lot of music I like today I would have never imagined, could have never imagined I would appreciate today.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
I like everything. I mean,
yeah,
I love pop reggae tunes from the 60s and 70s. I love progressive rock. I love Genesis. I love the Sex Pistols. I love Connie Francis.
yeah,
I love everything that's just music to
yeah.
me. And
There's
I think there's people who are what we'd call really the trendy people, who they think they're cool because they like a certain band, but they're not any cooler than anybody else who likes any other kind of music.
right, right,
Everybody's got their own taste, and
right.
and as long as you're true to yourself, you know,
Yeah,
if anyone's silly enough to listen to music because it will impress someone who thinks they're cool, then they're silly. Just listen to what you like. That's
right,
it.
right. Exactly. There's two types of music that I can't appreciate at all, and that's rap
Yeah,
and that speed metal,
yeah,
uh, that kind of stuff. It just, to me, it's like, I'm
yeah.
sorry. I've
Do you know,
tried.
if I was to pick two kinds of music that I don't like, it would be those two.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
speed metal can't go. My oldest son likes it. My oldest son's a really great guitar player, and he can play all that stuff. The speed metal. I mean, he can play it, but it drives me nuts listening to it. And he likes good people as well. He likes a lot of great music, like Elliott Smith and people like that. But I just can't go, and I can't go rap. Rap
yeah,
just annoys me. I like melody. There's
right.
no melody in a rap,
There's
you know.
there's I don't even consider it music really. People
Yeah,
talk,
yeah.
really, but
The only thing I would say is it does have it has a right to exist, but it
right.
doesn't exist in my house. It doesn't get in my house. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, can you think of anything else that you want to add?
Nah, not really. I'm probably going to make another album.
Okay.
Um, you know, probably record it in January. I plan to record it in January this year, but then one of the guys got COVID, and I cancelled the sessions. And on and off, people in the band have been getting ill here, there, and everywhere. I'm going to wait till next January now to finish it. The songs are written. Meanwhile, Enjoy the Melodic Sunshine has just been reissued on vinyl, various colours of vinyl, by a label in Glasgow called Last Night from Glasgow. the label got its name from a line in an ABBA song, Super Trooper, where they sing When I Met You Last Night in Glasgow, and that's where the label got its name. So I'm going to do that. And they're also, Last Night from Glasgow are also reissuing Fake Your Own Death on vinyl in October. And it's never been out on vinyl before. It was only a limited edition CD. It was mostly a digital album. So it's coming out in vinyl, it's coming out in white vinyl, and I think it's coming out in red vinyl. And black. Classic. So that's my plans for the future.
Sounds good. Definitely sounds good. All right. Well,
is there anything else you'd like to ask before
what's your favorite color, by the way?
Blue.
Yeah. Same here. Same here.
Do you know that's such a I love that question. What's your favorite color? Because blue is just, there's something about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of blue in my album covers and stuff through the ages.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with your personality and thing too. The what I love at Christmas time is the blue lights.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it's like a deep blue. It's just, I mean, it's so beautiful. It's so serene and
every Christmas when the Christmas tree goes up in our house, I will say to my wife, "Can we just have blue lights this year?"
Right.
She say, "No, no chance." So I think I'll buy myself a little Christmas tree for the room, for the bedroom, and I'll just put blue lights on that this year.
Hey, there you go. There you go.
That'll be it. That'll be sorted.
That'll work. Get your own blue Christmas. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank your wife again for helping set you up.
Yeah.
Too.
I will do.
I hope this turns out once I save it and look at the recording. I hope it turns out all, everything okay.
And have you been able to understand my Scottish accent? Okay.
Oh yeah.
This is me. This is my posh Scottish accent. If I was to speak in Glaswegian slang, you wouldn't understand what I was saying.
Probably not. I had to ask a couple of times to re-say things, but other than that, no.
Yeah, that's cool.
How about mine?
Clear as a bell.
Okay.
Crystal clear. Crystal clear.
Well, like I said, I've tried to, I work on it sometimes. It's like I do I like to do accents.
But Sean Connery.
Yeah, like Sean Connery. Yeah, but yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know. Anyway, I'll let you go, Daniel, and
okay.
Appreciate
it's been a pleasure.
Your time. I'm glad it has. It has been a pleasure for me also. So thank you for your time, and like I said, I hope everything works out.
You're welcome.
It'll be up on YouTube before too long.
Yeah. Have a listen to the new Band of Horses album. It's really good.
The what? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Have a listen to the new Band of Horses album.
Band of
Horses.
Oh, Band of Horses. Okay. At first I thought you said Band of Forces. Okay, Band of Horses. Oh yeah, I like them. I like them. Yes. But I haven't listened to their new one. I will check that out.
Best album they've made so far.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Really good.
Earlier stuff for sure. Okay.
Yeah. I'll listen to it.
I'll listen to that. All right.
Okay.
All right. We'll talk to you later. All right. Take care, Daniel.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.